Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Only Run Very Noob, bringing you Guardian gameplay on the Talishar client. Today I'm playing Bravo. I guess I should get into the list that I'm playing. In this video, I'm playing the list that I took to top 4 at my last Road to Nationals. Very excited about the finish. It's the first Nationals I've qualified for by just like doing it the hard way instead of experience grinding in like 2 years. So I'm very happy to be going to Minneapolis, I believe, to play in Nationals this summer. And all in all, I think it was just a great day, a good tournament. Got to play against a bunch of friends and a lot of support around me to get finally punch my ticket to Nationals. But the Bravo list I played is like a fatigue list. You might have seen something similar to this played by Charles Dunn at the AGE Open, I believe, in February, where he got second place. I decided to take this list over a more normal Bravo or a Victor because of its improved KO matchup, and I was definitely expecting a heavy KO field, and I wanted to target the meta I thought would show up, which was sort of accurate. KO was the most played deck, but it wasn't really like 25% of the field or anything. So maybe targeting the meta isn't really how you want to attack this current meta, at least at the Road to Nationals level. There's a lot of heroes you can play, at least at a semi-competitive level. Who knows how Pro Tour is going to look? And then I also wanted to mention another thing. You may have noticed this is my first video in a while. I think it's been about 2 weeks since I've posted a video. I recently started a new job, and it is difficult for me to find the time to do this, but I do have days off during the week, and I think I will try to at least get one video out a week on Wednesday, as that's my day off. There's a possibility I might do more. Maybe I'll record multiple videos and just sort of set them out to release like on a schedule when I have free time, because I really enjoy doing this and I don't want to stop. But without further ado, let's get into this game and the sideboarding. Today I'm playing against Victor, and with the fatigue list, my plan against Victor is to just play every card that isn't Imperial Warhorn. That includes Remembrance, it includes all 9 Staunch Responses, and Zealous Belting. I've found that Victor can sort of just like fatigue you with damage if you go a little lower on cards. So with the fatigue strategy, I'm definitely just trying to play a bunch of cards and get value where I can and not get counter fatigued. Remembrancing back Crippling Crushes in the late game can also be very good when your deck is like 15 blues and then you Crippling Crush, or you Remembrance back like 3 Crippling Crush. We lose the die roll and we're going second. Our opponent looks like he wants to just strip our entire hand because he's going to Zealous Belting into Hammer, forcing us to lose all of our cards, which is a little unfortunate. Luckily for us, we have a Staunch Response we can play on the Hammer, so we're only losing 3 cards and not 4 in the like fatigue battle. Of course, our setup looks sort of normal. Our opponent might not know that we're on fatigue immediately, even though they probably can see that we're on 69 cards. So yeah, I'm just going to block 6 here, and then when they hammer, I'm going to Staunch for 6 on the hammer. It's interesting, the fatigue strategy. You might think it would be mentally draining in like a long tournament playing fatigue, literally going like up close to time every round would be super well fatiguing. But honestly, it's really not that bad because the decisions aren't that difficult to make. You're just sort of blocking everything. Our hand's pretty good here. We have 2 E-strikes, so we're going to go 5 go again into 7. Again, not a lot to talk about in these fatigue turns. One big thing you have to learn to do when you're playing Bravo in general is assess threats, because you're more of a mid-range deck and you need to know when to steal tempo, when to block, when to use armor to use your big hands, pitch stacking, all this. But all of that mental bloat sort of goes away with fatigue. You don't really have to assess threats that much because you're just sort of willing to stop all of them. So to anyone that sort of struggles with making decisions over a long tournament day, maybe give Fatigue Bravo a shot, because honestly the decisions aren't that difficult to make. Not that I would recommend playing a Fatigue deck at an armory if you're looking to make friends, but you know, it's a card game, and if you're competitive, sometimes you will just do what you need to win, even if it makes everyone groan. Not that I think this deck is amazing. I am attending Pro Tour in about a week, and don't think I'm going to play Fatigue, but not too sure. Unfortunately, I'm still undecided between like all the Guardian options. I can almost guarantee you I'll be playing a Guardian in LA though. Our hand can't do much here, so we're just going to hammer for 6, an Arsenal and defense reaction, and IP ourselves with the other one, which is perfectly fine. Our opponent blocked out our E-Strike turn and gave us a 4-card hand. We're not expecting to have too many 4-card hands playing Fatigue. Spinal Crush for 10. I think I'm just gonna block this with all of my 0 for 4 defense reactions, Hammer for 4, and Arsenal Staunch. There's a few ways we could go about this. We could just block 8 and then like IP ourselves again, but I don't think we need to do that. I think Command and Conquer can go on the bottom. It could really go top or bottom. It's not a huge deal. But I'd rather get it bottom for maybe when they don't have Crown of Providence up, or when they have a card in Arsenal, because we can't guarantee that next turn they're going to want to Arsenal a card. I will top the Starstruck though, in the off chance that we have to clash, and also we're going to have Tunic up, so we might be able to like pitch a blue to Staunch Response, and then keep 2 blues and Starstruck to throw 10. Not that the crush effect is that great into the Guardian Mirror, but we're just looking to like resolve some big attacks to like 3 for 1 our opponent on deck damage. Because if we're just hammering for 4 all game and they're throwing big attacks at us, that's how they sort of counter fatigue us. And they do clash with us, which is pretty sweet. We know the Starstruck's on top, and we're probably going to beat everything that's not like a Pulverize. They just hammer for 6. I think we can block 3 here. I don't think we need to staunch this. I think we can just block 3 and then still send a Starstruck. Let's up our play speed a little, just because the fatigue deck is... the decisions aren't that intricate. I'm just gonna speed up the video. Our opponent does decide to block, which was fairly expected. They don't have Tunic up either, so it looks like they're just going to give us their whole hand. Here, another pretty easy hand to play out. We're just going to E-Strike go again, getting rid of the Sigil so that we can hammer for 6 with the 2 cards we have behind. Only losing 1 card from our deck to deal 11. quite nice when we're trying to fatigue our opponent. If we had a blue, like instead of the E-Strike, we could have like gained 3 and sent Spinal Crush, but I'm perfectly fine with the line we got to do. They just E-Strike for 7. We're just going to red staunch this and then hammer for 4. IPing ourselves, but that's sort of what happens with fatigue. You can't always utilize your entire hand. And we're going to have Tunic up with Oasis in hand, which is fine. It looks like they're going to E-Strike for 5 go again. And I think I'm just going to sink below this and then look to red staunch their follow-up. I'm not sure what their follow-up is going to be. If it's just hammer... Yeah, if it's just hammer, we probably still just staunch it for 7, Arsenal the Oasis Respite, and hammer for 4. But they took 4 to keep like their whole hand, so I'm expecting something maybe a little bit bigger than hammer here. Because they had Tunic up, they could have blocked. Yeah, we're getting Golden Sunned here. So this is actually a spot where we actually have more than just like a simple option. We could red staunch for 10 in Arsenal Oasis, or we could staunch for 7 and Oasis and then still be able to hammer for 4. I kind of like the hammer for 4 line a little bit better, but I'm not sure why though, so let me just think about this. Because it's just intuitive to me to want to hammer for 4 if I can. It's kind of the same thing, right? So if I staunch for 10 in Arsenal Oasis Respite, it's only using 1 card to stop his 1 card, which is good. We're even on fatigue right there, which if we do that the whole game, we're going to win. We're up 52 to 43 cards. But if I Oasis and staunch, that's 2 for 1, but then I get to hammer for 4, which will probably be a 0 for 1. Our opponent will probably block 3. So the hammer line actually leaks 1 damage and keeps us even on fatigue rate. It doesn't give us an Oasis in Arsenal though. Yeah, I don't know. This is sort of a nuanced decision. Why don't you let me know down in the comments what you would do? And we'll see what you guys think. But it looks like I am going to Oasis and staunch so that I can hammer for 4, threatening my opponent's life. Not that that's like a huge win condition, but you have to pressure a little bit. I think if we were just blocking the whole game, we're probably going to lose to fatigue by damage. Because I would expect Victor to be playing like Red Thunderquakes and other big attacks. We don't really have too much action in Remembrance, although E-Strike's fine. Spinal Crush is really annoying here because I would have been totally willing to like take some damage to Zealous Belting, but I think I just got to block 5, hammer for 4, and Arsenal Remembrance. Our options for Remembrance aren't great here, like I was starting to say, but we could get like Spinal or like Starstruck, Spinal, and E-Strike, or Starstruck and 2 E-Strikes, which is like fine. It's better than pitching the Remembrance, I think. I really don't like drawing Remembrance, and the only thing I like less than drawing Remembrance is drawing it twice, so I really try not to pitch that card. Here, I think I can just Oasis Respite this to throw Spinal Crush. But the other line, I guess, is block 6, hammer 4, Remembrance back, like a couple E-Strikes and Starstruck or something, and then Arsenal the Oasis Respite. But I think the Spinal Crush is going to be worth a little more. We're going to get at least 2 cards. So 2 for 1. We got some Tunic value with the Oasis. Not sort of keeping the counter on our Tunic for multiple turns, so we get to generate a little extra value over the course of the game. Our opponent trounces and we tie, or I win one and then we tie one. They use a staunch response. That's an interesting thing. That's a good thing to take note of. Drawing the second remembrance isn't great here. I could just hammer for 6, use remembrance, and then like IP myself, or I could Macho Grande for 8. Those are basically the 2 options I see. I kind of like just hammering for 6 and using the remembrance, because like I said, I don't really like to pitch remembrance at all. If I had Tunic up, I could just like Macho Grande and then play remembrance, but I don't. And honestly, the cards I remembrance back like don't have to be super high value. Like they don't always have to be 3 Crippling Crushes, because it's really just trying to like counteract getting fatigued by damage and shuffling like more threats back in my deck, which I can do. They're not the best threat in my deck, but shuffling back Enlightened Strikes is fine. Shuffling back like Spinal Crushes and Starstrucks is like fine. But it looks like I decided to just Macho Grande. Not too sure why I would do this. Getting some damage in is nice, but honestly, like, we want our opponent to block with their cards. We're just up so far on the fatigue race that I think them blocking is good. We get sort of lucky though, and they end up using a staunch response. So that just sort of means that our Crippling Crushes, when we start to dominate them in the end game, will be landing. We draw a 4 red hand with no Tunic and Oasis, so it's a little awkward. But I think with his 3-card hand, he's probably gonna send like Hammer. There's potential that his arsenal's like Red Thunderquake and he sends like 10. But I'm perfectly fine blocking with Command and Conquer and Fate Foreseen, and then like using Tunic and pitching Oasis to throw Command and Conquer. They end up throwing a Chokeslam, which gives our Fate Foreseen a little bit more value, because we were going to block the hammer for 7 anyway with the line I just talked about. So we get to do that same line. Blocking 7, taking 1. I'll put the blue staunch on bottom, I think, because it'll be nice next to the Oasis Respite. In case Tunic isn't up, we can get value. Of course, pitching a blue for the staunch and the Oasis. And then yeah, we just use Tunic and Oasis to pitch into Command and Conquer. They don't have an arsenal, but it's like throwing 6 off an all-red hand is fine. Our only other option was to just pass. It's not like we could have hammered for 6 instead. They trounce us and lose again. Well, not lose, but they don't win, so no one gets any value. And they just pass the turn. Not too sure what they could have in their hand. 2 reds probably. So we're just going to throw the biggest stack we have, which is Macho Grande. They play Test of Strength and we win. We see a red pummel on top. We draw a couple Crippling Crushes here. So I think I'm going to block with blue and Crippling Crush, and then hammer for 4, Arsenal Crippling Crush, and then Remembrance back the Crippling Crush I just blocked with, plus probably Starstruck and Enlightened Strike would be my guess. Spinal Crush over Enlightened Strike is probably fine too. Enlightened Strike and Spinal Crush are both sort of 3-card 9s, except for like 1 card. Except Enlightened Strike sort of leaks damage a little better because it goes 5-4 instead of just 9. So Enlightened Strike might just be objectively better, because if we ever get a 4-card hand, it's like 1 card for 11 with, you know, into hammer for 6. We immediately draw the Crippling Crush we shuffled back and the 3rd Crippling Crush in our deck. Not ideal, but we do have another Remembrance on our deck, so blocking with these Crippling Crushes is probably fine here. I would probably only block with 1 if my Staunch Response was a 3 cost to turn on Hammer, but since pitching the additional Crippling Crush here with the blue wouldn't even pump our Hammer, I think just blocking is fine and looking to Remembrance him back later when we draw it. Because we shuffled that Remembrance back, that Remembrance might come back quicker than we think. Let's Hammer for 4, Sigil for 3. This game is going very well. Our opponent hasn't really pressured us a ton, and we're just up so many cards in our deck. They've used 2 Staunch Responses, so if they play 3, they have like 1 left for our Crippling Crushes, which we could have like 5 or 6 of remaining, depending on how our Remembrance gets played. If we play the Crippling Crush in our arsenal before we draw our 2nd Remembrance. E-Strike, I'm just fine blocking 3 and then staunching the Hammer for 7. They have Tunic up, so we're definitely expecting this Sledge. We don't have to get greedy and trade life to like try to Crippling Crush them here. We can just like wait for an opportunity to play it. They test the strength and we get another gold, which will allow us to 1-card 6 if the endgame gets tight. Of course, pitching a blue to break gold, drawing a blue, then pitching it to hammer for 6. Yeah, I don't hate just blocking 6 here to throw the crippling. I was gonna pause, but pretty easy decision. I could have also blocked like Starstruck and a blue and then used Tunic to throw Spinal, but I'm not too sure why I would do that. It seems better to just block all the damage and throw a Crippling Crush, get a bunch of cards here. Our opponent has Clash of Vigor and Clash of Might. It seems that they're on a list that I used to be on. Very similar. It's turn 16 and we haven't seen a red Thunderquake though, so it might be a little different. Yeah, it looks like they have red Disable over red Thunderquake, which is also something I've considered. They just have to end their turn and we're just going to CNC here. They don't have Tunic up, only 1 card, they can't Sledge. They might be afraid of Pummel, but it's turn 17 and I haven't shown a Pummel all game, so I'm not sure. It looks like they are afraid of Pummel, so we get a lot of value there. Yep, they're going to Sledge for 6. I'm just going to block 6, send 4, gain 3. And grind them down. They just block with Crown of Providence. Maybe this is like a Rouse the Ancients turn coming or something. Oh no, they have a CNC Pummel. I'm just going to Tunic Oasis and then take the damage so that I can Zealous Belting them. I'm going to end up taking 6. discarding a Cranial Crush. And letting them use their Civic Steps here. But still, sending 11 and only using one card, very good. Very good when you're trying to fatigue your opponent. Crippling Crush, Zealous Belting, 4-card E-Strike hands. All of these are going to pull a lot of cards from our opponent. And only cost us one card. Not that we really need to be going fatigue positive anymore. We could just trade evenly back and forth and end up with like 10 more cards than them. But we're not going to do that. Instead of hammering us, they just heave a blue Thunderquake, and we get to punish by having a 10 here. Not too sure. I think they probably are supposed to just sledge us, but maybe they know that they can't like send 6, block 6, and win this game. So maybe they're looking to like heave a big attack and then like pummel it or something. Not too sure. I'm just going to block 7 with a Sink and a blue, and then hammer for 4 and Arsenal the Sigil. We even have like all of our armor. I think this game is pretty much over at this point. Our opponent only has 16 cards, we have 27. We have all our armor, we're up 10 life. We could just win this game in multiple ways from this point, I think. Our opponent really didn't get any like good pummels or Zealous Belting turns. Macho Grande, I'm just gonna use Yellow Staunch Response for 9 and then hammer for 4. Maybe our Victor opponent isn't even running Rouse the Ancients? Have I just not seen one of those? I think to battle fatigue, you definitely need to be running all of your threats. Because Rouse the Ancients can straight up be like 13 damage for only 1 card fatigued, which is the exact thing you kind of want here. So yeah, I'm just going to block, hammer for 4, Remembrance back, triple Crippling Crush, and pass. Just block 6. That's interesting. I think there was probably another line here that I could have just staunched for 8, gain 3, and Arsenal Crippling Crush. Not that I think it matters in this game state, but it might have been slightly more efficient to do that. Although hammering for them for 4, I guess, prevents them from having like a huge hand that could potentially like pummel something problematic. Because they can't be taking 4 just forever. But I have all my armor. I got way more cards, way more life. So I don't think that decision really matters a ton here. Macho Grande for 8. His arsenal's been there a long time. Maybe it's the 3rd red Staunch. So I think I just want to like block this Macho Grande with my blue Staunch and hammer for 4. Not giving up a bunch to Crippling Crush my opponent. And then our opponent just scoops and asks for a rematch, but that's the game. Let's see if we can get the win screen here just to see the value. But yeah, that's sort of how fatigue games have been going for me. They've been going like super well. The average value, honestly, isn't that bad. Like 11 average value per turn seems super low for like a regular deck, but for a fatigue deck, I think that's actually like fine. I don't think average value per turn calculates Sigil of Solace. It might though. Not that the 2 or 3 sigils I played would really move the needle that much for the 11 value. It'd probably be like 11.1, 11.2 or something. So maybe not that important. And it also wouldn't calculate like fatigue rate, I don't think. I don't even know how it would quantify that. Yeah, it looks like it's... Oh, that's average damage. I don't think there's average damage prevented per turn on this, which is probably what you would add to average damage threatened per turn to get your average value. Don't really know. But yeah, that was the game. Victor can sort of be a little difficult for Fatigue Bravo sometimes, just because they have so many big attacks. Not too sure what happened this game for our Victor opponent. There were a few turns where they just passed the turn with like 2 cards in their hand. So they either had 2 reds and couldn't hammer, or they wanted to like heave a Thunderquake instead. Not sure if that's better, but maybe at the game states he was doing it at, it was just sort of like a desperation play where he knew just sending 6 and me blocking 6 and sending hammer back was going to be like a winning game plan for me. Fatigue is definitely like a big skill check. I think at an RTN level or even like a ProQuest level, which is coming up in like a month or so, Fatigue is a really good option because there's just going to be a lot of opponents that aren't beating Fatigue. They're just not really thinking about the game in that way. They're just sort of trying to like maximize their value per turn. And while there are some decks that can do that and beat Fatigue, most decks need like an overarching game plan. They need to know what the end game looks like. They need to know what threats they're saving for the end game. And I think they need to make sacrifices throughout the game to have bigger pop-off turns so they leak more damage, and just sort of cross their fingers that Bravo can't utilize the tempo they're giving them by setting up. That's one of the big issues with Fatigue Bravo is Fatigue old. Like if you remember playing that way back in the day, Fatigue Oldhim, you could pretty much set up and pass the turn, and they couldn't do a ton with their whole hand. Towards the end stages, most Oldhims weren't even doing stuff like Oaken Old. They were just sort of like, the best thing they could do was like pummel a CNC, which is pretty good, but they have to have like the perfect hand to do that. It's like 2 cards they have to combine to do that. They could also throw like Red Glacial, but at the end of the day, that's just damage, and if they're trying to fatigue you, you can probably afford to take 10 quite a bit. But Bravo is different. Like if you take time to set up to try to get through the fatigue, they can just crippling crush you and make you block with your power cards, or interrupt sort of a turn where you set up like mites and agility or something. That might not be too applicable because the deck that makes might and agility KO can sort of do it while still like applying pressure. They're not like completely setting up with like the blue that makes an agility and a might or something. They're just sort of getting it from their hero and assault and battery or something. But anyway, that's kind of a tangent. Fatigue Bravo, I think, is actually a fairly solid deck at like tier 2 and under events, because you're just gonna get a lot of free wins from people not necessarily not being prepared for fatigue, but even if their deck is built for fatigue, like they're not at the level of player that they need to be to really have like a solid game plan into fatigue. Maybe I'm underestimating your average like day 1 calling player, but from my experience, certain strategies are just really hard for them to beat. So I think this might be a good choice for RTN and ProQuest. But that leads me into Pro Tour. So next week I'll be attending Pro Tour LA, playing in the main event. It'll be my first Pro Tour. I'm very excited about that. And I don't think Fatigue is going to be like a super good option for that tournament. And the reason is that your average Pro Tour competitor is probably very good and will have a plan for Fatigue. So unless they're just playing a deck that's super soft to Fatigue, and even if they have a plan, they're still unfavored, you're just not going to get any free wins at the Pro Tour level. So I would definitely be wary of sleeving this deck up next week. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you're going to be at Pro Tour LA next weekend, and you see me, please come say hi. I love meeting you guys. It's always one of the highlights for me for these events. You know, I sort of wear my heart on my sleeve. So if you walk up to me like right after I lost like a match in the tournament, maybe I'm like deep in the tournament and that match knocked me out of top 8 or top 16 or top 32 or something, I might look pretty upset, but I really can't help it. I care a lot. Some might even label me as being a sore loser, and you know, I wouldn't even deny that. I definitely take this very seriously, and I like this a lot. But please don't let that prevent you from coming up and saying hi. It'll probably cheer me up. It'll get my mind on something else, and we can chat about this great game and this great class that we all love. So yeah, I look forward to seeing any and all of you next week in LA. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe down below, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.